When we need to hear all of us, we will let you know so that we unmute you and you're able to communicate to us. The first thing I would like to do, ladies and gentlemen, just for those of you who may be joining us and don't know a little bit about the Inter-University Council for East Africa, allow me to just say one or two things about this institution. It is one of the 8 institutions of the East African community. It is responsible for advising the partner states, and the partner states here I'm referring to all the member states of the East African community, beginning with Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan. So our responsibility as a community is to advise those partner states on all matters higher education. I want to let you know that if you come from the universities in the East African region, you are Inter-University Council for East Africa. The Inter-University Council for East Africa is not the secretariat where we are right now. We are just your servants. The Inter-University Council includes every one of you from the various universities. All universities in the region or university colleges or degree awarding institutions are eligible members of the Inter-University Council for East Africa. And this institution is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in the East African community. If you trace back its history, you'll find it somewhere in 1970, when 3 independent universities were created in East Africa, the University of Dar es Salaam, Makerere University, and the University of Nairobi. And so 2020 marks our 50th year of existence. And it's one of the reasons why we are meeting here as we seek to celebrate 50 years of existence. And we have chosen to do this by holding 3 webinars. The first one, we held it on the 7th of August. This one was dealing with research and innovations. And we are now holding the second one today, which is on higher education and community engagement, policy and practice in East Africa. And we will hold a third one. And the third one is going to be on the 23rd of September, 2020. Please mark this in your diaries. On the 23rd of September, 2020, we are going to hold the 3rd webinar. And this one is going to be looking at global trends of higher education and trying to see how that also is affecting us as a region. We will have the vice chancellors of the original universities in that webinar series. We'll get someone who will be representing private universities, and we'll get other people to contribute to that particular debate. I think you don't want to miss that one. We want to invite you to attend when that one comes up. In October, we hope we are going to hold a big meeting here in Kampala, and we hope that many of you can join us that time as we seek to do some at least physical celebration. Fingers crossed that the pandemic will have waned and the skies will be open. That's what we are looking forward to. As we think about this, ladies and gentlemen, we are also thinking about Vision 2050 for the East African community. And we want to start asking ourselves, what role can universities play to make sure that the Vision 2050 is achieved? But we also want to use this period of webinar series to gather ideas because we are at the tail end of the strategic plan of the Inter-University Council for East Africa. It began from 2016, it will go to 2021. So we'll need a new strategic plan from 2021 to 2026. And we need to say, what do we need to do to make sure that we take higher education in the region to the next level? And ladies and gentlemen, we need to remember that although the 3 functions of universities are research, teaching and learning, and community engagement, and sometimes this function of community engagement is not given as much attention as it should be, we think. But we want to hear from the speakers today and see whether there are some things that we can do. So these are the issues we want to be looking at. In terms of the presentations, the moderator will lead us. But during the presentations, I want to invite you, those of you who would like to either ask questions or make comments, send those in the chat room and we'll be looking at them. And in the course of the time, we'll be helping the moderator in terms of having the right questions that can be asked. So feel free to be doing that as the presentation goes on. But without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our moderator. I think I'll just introduce the moderator and then he can introduce the speakers. So our moderator is Professor Shabani, and Professor Shabani is from the Republic of Burundi. He is the president of the National Commission for Higher Education. He is also the director of the Doctoral Studies at the University of Burundi. He is the president of the International Conference on Quality Assurance. He is the president of the Burundi Academy of Science and Technology. And I could go on, but I don't want to do that. I will let him come a little bit later. He has worked with UNESCO for 17 years. As a senior specialist in higher education, he has held many senior positions, including Deputy Secretary of the General Association of African Universities. And as I said, if you want me to read everything, we might take too long. So I'll let him let us in on some of the other things that he would like us to know. But otherwise, Professor Shabani, I want to welcome you to host this session. Karibu.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Executive Secretary, colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to moderate this very important session. First, I should like to take opportunity to congratulate the University Council for the 50 years and mainly the achievements which we could see during this period. I think we can now go to our program. You have received a draft program, which is actually the final one. We will start with the keynote address for 20 to 25 minutes. And as it was indicated, we could take at the end of this maybe 1 or 2 questions of clarifications before we allow the panel speakers to come in. We have 4 speakers for the panel session, and everyone will be given 10 to 15 minutes. And at the end of this panel presentations, we'll open the floor for discussions, and then around 12:45, we will have a closing message from the Secretariat. So I should like to invite now the keynote speaker, Professor Sibuga from Sokoine University of Agriculture. Maybe ask her to, because I also have a long bio. If I'm going to read it, it will take time. So I will ask her to just highlight quickly a few elements of her biography and then start with the presentation. And she has 20 to 25 minutes to make the presentation. So, Madam, most welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name, as you said, is Kallunde Sibuga. I'm based at Sokoine University of Agriculture. And I've worked here for many years, and currently I'm holding the position of professor. I'm in the Department of Crop Science and Horticulture. And my area of specialization is weed management and agronomy. In the course of the years, I've taught various courses in undergraduate, postgraduate, conducted research, both with local teams and also international teams. I've also had some administrative positions. I was head of department for about 6 years, and I've coordinator of quality assurance for about 7 years. And I've also coordinated international programs of collaboration between Sokoine University and universities abroad, particularly in the United States. And well, I've supervised a number of MSc, PhD students who are now also professors, some of them. So in brief, I think that covers for today.
Okay.
You
are now invited to make your presentation.
Okay.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. I am having okay, I'm going to talk about community engagement, and I'll begin by sharing with you what we mean by community engagement. I will briefly discuss the policy framework landscape, and then go to the community of practice, what we actually do in these areas. I'm having technical problems. It's not moving. What am I supposed to do? Okay. And then I'll talk about challenges and the way forward. Okay, coming to the definition of community engagement, I've chosen to take the definition given by Benda in 2008, where essentially we talk about community engagement meaning the process of knowledge exchange between universities and the communities that are concerned. And usually community engagement takes the nature of interdisciplinary approach. And you can have situations where universities and communities conduct joint research, where we call it co-inquiry together, and finally come up with some solutions to some problems. There's also an aspect of co-creation, where university staff are working together with communities to create something out of the efforts that are put in, and together they may create something for the benefit of the community, immediate community, but also other communities. And also community engagement provides a situation where we can use the knowledge to benefit both the academia in terms of using whatever has been learned through co-creation in their teaching and further research activities, while also solving real-world problems. So where you have a situation where academics are engaged with communities, you can end up with those particular aspects. Sorry, some of the slides have been moving a little bit. So when we talk about the activities, we can have community engagement activities at the locality level, at where you have neighborhoods within the universities, and they are facing certain aspects. They may straight come to the university seeking for assistance. You can have community engagement at national level, where universities can adopt geographical locations where they concentrate their activities for the benefit of both the community and also the university population. But also you can have community engagement at regional and international levels. This is commonly the case where you have collaboration with other researchers outside the university and probably outside the country, where the interest would be to identify and work together with communities that are likely to benefit from whatever you are doing. And in these settings, you have both formal and informal settings. Formal in the sense of having maybe a memorandum of understanding with specific objectives and so on and so forth. And informal, where a researcher may visit an area and during the discussion, be informed of some challenges that need solutions and decide to work together without any written memorandum of understanding or anything of the sort. So both formal and informal community engagement activities take place. It's a little bit slow. And the reason why we talk about universities engaging in community development is what I'm going to be talking about a little bit more from now. Because first of all, I think it has, okay. The mandates of universities generally fall in these 4 areas, as has already been said. We have training, which covers both teaching and learning. And then we have research where universities may have different levels of capacity, of quality, of innovativeness, and so on and so forth. And then we have outreach, which deals with advisory services and other community services. And this also applies to the case of consultancy, where a university has consultancy as one of its mandates as well. Now, in the universities, whom are we dealing with, and why are universities key in community engagement? First of all, we see that universities are agents of change. They're agents of change because they have a lot of specialized expertise, and therefore they are knowledge hubs, so to speak. You have a lot of staff with a lot of training in different areas, and therefore universities harbor a wide range of knowledge, which can be put to good use if communities come together with university staff. When it comes to resource mobilization, universities are better placed in seeking for financial resources both from within the country and also from abroad. And we find that in most cases, our universities are surrounded by local communities. And these local communities make for a particular assistance in a specific issue. So we're blending, universities usually blending with the local communities to the extent of, for example, when universities also need maybe extra accommodation for their staff, they usually approach the local communities. So all of these are examples of community engagement in different facets. And then we have the expertise now. Over many years, you have the junior staff, senior staff, and so on, who have expertise, have gained expertise over the years, and therefore they are better placed to solve societal challenges. But also you have, in some countries, specific roles that are assigned to universities by their country in order to contribute to national development. So all these provide opportunities for university community engagement. Now I want to go into the policy framework. Now, where are we? When I searched through different countries, different universities, I actually didn't come up with very specific policies on community engagement. Rather, what I found was many universities engage in community activities using proxy, what I'm calling proxy policies. For example, outreach policies, which would have statements indicating that staff are expected to interact with communities in this and that. Research policy and guidelines, which may also indicate that they expect staff to work with communities to solve their problems. Civic engagement policies, gender policies, etc., etc. So, given this situation, and I'm going to use the example of RUFORUM, which is the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Building in Agriculture, as an example, because I know not all universities are agriculture based, but I'm going to use this because this is a big forum for many universities. Currently, it has a membership of about 125 universities from about 38 countries. So it is wide encompassing. So they conducted a study in 2017, to find out the aspect of community engagement framework and strategy in different universities. And from the study, what came out was that there's a wide variation of community engagement activities that are being implemented by different universities, but generally these are implemented under different frameworks rather than dedicated policies on community engagement, as I just said. So it suffices to say that there's a good level of community engagement activities going on in different universities. But at the same time, it also suffices to say that the policies are not directly targeting community engagement as such. In other words, I would expect in a policy that is dedicated to that to have very specific terminologies, which are currently not there. So given that situation, I now want to look at the community of practice for university community engagement. It should be U-CE, not U-EC. Okay, in terms of training, now I'm going back to the mandates and trying to point out how universities engage in communities in the course of implementing their various mandates. Beginning with training, we see that universities often go back to government departments and so on, and products of their universities to determine what the manpower needs are. They discuss on what the situation is. They look at development programs for the future. And through discussion, they determine manpower needs assessment, which brings in the aspect of community involvement in determining the manpower needs for the future. And when that is done, when it comes now to program development, it is a requirement for many universities in East Africa that program development should take into consideration stakeholder participation. So, for example, in Tanzania, if I can use Tanzania, a program cannot be passed by TCU without evidence of stakeholder participation in the development. And therefore, this takes university staff back to communities to discuss and dialogue and have their contribution in the programs, taking into consideration their specific needs and expectations. Then you have attachments. Many universities in East Africa send out their students for a period of time for experiential learning. And this can take the form of field practicals for, we call it in agriculture, industrial practicals for those who are doing engineering and so on, teaching practicals for those who are doing teaching programs and so on. And this takes place in many different versions where students may be attached to particular individuals in communities, particular groups to communities, particular industry in a certain area. And this provides an opportunity for engagement on a one-to-one between students and whatever the host is. And it has proven to be very, very, very useful in the case of graduate university students, because this also avails them an opportunity for employment. And we have seen this happening quite a lot, that after being attached to a certain organization, you end up the organization and the organization being impressed by what they see, they end up coming to interview students from your university for potential employment. So that is a mutual benefit. Then we have tracer studies. Tracer studies intend to find out what the users of our products think about the graduates, whether the universities are doing the job rightly, whether they are producing graduates that can cope with the job requirements outside the universities. So again, with tracer studies, you have to go back to communities. The communities that are using our products, the communities that may also be looking at our products, maybe not using them straight, but they can see what is happening. And therefore, tracer studies also engage communities in one way or another. And then you have memorandum of understandings between universities and government institutions for specific objectives, universities and NGOs, universities and other universities, either locally or even abroad. And these also provide an opportunity for those institutions to engage with universities for a common purpose. And then you have the informal collaborations, particularly those which may take place in villages, between villagers of some kind, or just groups of people in cities and so on, where they may actually approach the university seeking for specific assistance, and the university may oblige, or students from the university may recognize an aspect that needs to be worked upon, and they go in and engage the communities for the purpose of attaining a solution. Scholarships. Many universities do offer scholarships as a way of, showing gratitude to the clients that have been sending students to the universities. So they offer scholarships, sometimes from their own funding, sometimes through projects that are based in universities. And these also create a situation where communities appreciate the existence of these universities, and that they are being considered as part of the universities by being offered scholarships to advance themselves in many different ways. And there are many other ways in which, which I think many of us know, and they'll be brought forward by the other speakers, I believe. Now, in terms of research, again, we see a lot of examples for community engagement in research. We have situations where certain areas of the community may demand for certain research to be done in order to solve a specific problem, which may be in the form of, in the area of manufacturing, in the area of processing, in the area of marketing, in the area of production, and so on and so forth. And we've seen cases where communities send letters to universities asking if they could be assisted to solve certain challenges, and universities, in most cases, usually respond by sending their staff to find out how best to address those issues. And then joint or on-site research is a very common phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that is happening in agriculture, on the farms, in medical schools, through hospitals, in education colleges, in schools, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of joint research programs that are going on in which communities are participating directly, depending on where they are. And this creates a situation where communities also get to know what is happening in these particular institutions, and they can express their need for assistance in certain issues. Then, of course, you have the national priorities, where the government may actually identify a certain university as being potential to address a certain problem that may be in the nation. And therefore, national priorities also provide an opportunity in that sense, but also universities are also part of the general community, and they know what the national priorities are. And this may come as an initiative from the university itself to address some national priority of interest in their country. And that together now, it means that we have we are engaged in socially responsive research in trying to address issues of immediate concern, issues of significance to both the economic and also the national well-being. When it comes to consultancy or advisory services, much as we know that consultancy is done on the basis of payment, but we believe that in the course of doing that, we also engage communities and provide advisory services. We know that many universities have consultancy units at different levels and in different forms. And these consultancy units serve a very important purpose of informing the community that here we have the expertise. In case we are required, we are ready to do it. And I've seen cases where consultancy units are willing to lower their pay rates when it comes to situations where they think the client is not so financially endowed for one or more reasons. And that is part of what I would call, community engagement and mutual benefit. And this consultancies, of course, can be done on request, like a certain district may request to have a certain study done, or they could be on competitive bidding where an organization puts up their advert for consultancy services and the universities bid. But in the end, they will end up in a situation where we have contributed to community engagement. And we have different kinds of clients, as you can see on the screen. Outreach. Outreach is probably where we get a lot of direct community engagement between universities and communities.
Professor, you have 5
Many
minutes.
universities have
5 minutes more.
Okay. Many universities have outreach sessions. They conduct short-term tailored trainings. We participate in shows at local, national, and international, and we even organize our own showcasing during open days. Industries offer incubator programs and so on and so forth. And there's also situations where universities invite local industry for dialogue to determine how they can participate or engage. And of course, now we have the social media, which is being used by universities to inform communities of what their capabilities are. In addition to that, we have some other special programs like the World Bank Centers of Excellency, the supervised enterprise projects in some universities. Now, on challenges. The challenges are variable, but one of the key challenges is that we have done it quite a lot in terms of community engagement, but documentation is usually scattered to the extent that it is very difficult to actually pinpoint what a specific university might have done over a course of years. Funding is also another. Staffing levels are going down. There are a lot of experienced staff retiring and so on. Issues of IPR and patents, in case research brings out innovation, are issues that need. The lack of structured university community engagement programs, and also poor recording of alumni, our alumni, and therefore failure to engage them fully when we get out, when universities get out for community engagement. So our way forward, first of all, I want to say that from the Reform study, it emerged that increasingly higher education institutions and research organizations are being required to make strategic commitments to engaging with the public, which means this requires policies, guidelines, procedures to be in place. And secondly, researchers and academic staff need to be recognized and valued for their community engagement activities. Most of the promotion is based on publications in journals. Very little weight is given to community engagement. So if you want to overturn the glass ceiling for promotions, we need to consider, universities need to consider giving more weight to community engagement, or even equal weight to community engagement as compared to publications of journals. And also we need to institutionalize community engagement in curriculum for credit. We need to brand our community engagement efforts by adopting an area or an issue and really concentrate on it. We need to enhance community engagement across borders, even within East Africa, such that students can move from one area to another. We often see students coming from the US as a requirement to spend a semester outside. Maybe it is time we came to that. And lastly, we need to establish more centers for community engagement, enhance partnerships with local and international stakeholders, and increase funding, both from within the university and also through mobilization. And with that, I wish to thank the Inter-University Council for East Africa for having availed me the position, to speak. The EAC, of course, as I was said, IUCEA is part of EAC. And lastly, my university for having nurtured me for these many years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sibuga, for this very rich presentation. I suggest maybe we open for 1 or 2 questions before we move to the panel presentations. I don't know how we will proceed. Maybe the secretary should advise how we can select the 2 people to make comments or to ask questions before we move forward.
Mr. Chairman, we have been trying to see the comments that are coming on the forum.
Yes.
We have a few questions, but we feel that maybe it's better to allow the panelists to respond, because some of the questions raised here could relate to some of the issues that the speakers are going to speak about. Okay. And then once they have done that, you can pick a few rounds of questions.
All right. All right. Thank you for that suggestion. So I think we should now move to the panel presentations. We have 4 panelists, and we will take them in the order it was suggested in the program. So we will start with Dr. Byamukama, 10 minutes, maybe just 1-2 minutes for introduction, and then you make your presentation. So if you are ready, Dr. Byamukama, you can take the floor. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this important conversation. My name is Siobhan Byamukama. I'm the Managing Director of Babo Rwanda. I live in Rwanda. I grew up in Uganda most of my life, I think until 2003, I think. Yeah, 2003. And then moved to Rwanda. I am a lawyer by profession. I am a mother of 2 little boys. I wonder what else to add in my introduction. Yeah, so I think I just sort of mentioned it. Now I've really enjoyed the conversation from the previous speaker, and obviously I'm not in academia. I'm in industry. I run a company, and I kind of thought, what is the best way I can speak to this conversation? And I thought that perhaps, although I'm an ancient student, 17 years ago is when I finished 17 years ago is when I left Makerere University and LDC 17 years ago. So I'll sort of like speak from my experience as a student, and then perhaps, and as a student from a space of, you know, I've listened to what, you know, from what the lecturer of what the intention is and what the program is and what it is that we want to achieve. So I'd like to speak from a recipient perspective. You know, I'm a recipient as a student. I'm also then a recipient as now an employer. So I know that, you know, we're saying that community participation and engagement is very, hi, do you have a question? Okay, apologies. So yes. Can I continue?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know that the intention is to have community engagement. And from the last speaker, I think she said one very critical thing when she said, it has to be given attention, or if we are equal attention as research. For me, it feels like it should be a little bit more, you know, okay, at least equal status, or if not, more. Because what it is that why are students in your university? They are going to go into industry, they're going to go into these communities. So what, so there has to be a loop of what you're producing, because you need to also see the results that you get at the end of the day. So it's very, very critical. So I'd like to start from, you know, from that recommendation that is very critical. So as a student, I remember I was in Makerere until 2002 and went to LDC in 2003. And I think that for me, community engagement is you engaging with industry. Obviously, community engagement means many things. I've decided to focus on one little aspect of it. You know, engagement of industry with the students. And what was the experience of having to do that? So there are a couple of things. The intention was there. We would get, we would go and work in law firms. But I feel like universities and the workplace, there's a bit of a power dynamic that you as professors and lecturers need to look at. Because you send your students to these places with no clear outcome. You know, when you go to this place, what is my conversation with your employer and what are you getting in return? Because as a student, I felt like, you know, years later, it's like a place of cheap labor, you know? Can you please go to the High Court and submit this letter? Can you go to the land register and whatever on this case? Can you go and, you ended up just running around and doing, you know, cheap work that is not necessarily the learning opportunity that your lecturer intended for you to come. So there has to be an engagement between universities and where these students are placed to kind of say, these are the learning outcomes. I want my student to come to you. I would like them to learn 1, 2, 3. I've also seen it in different workplaces where these students come in, they take them on, and the next thing is they place you in a marketing department, you do some very basic field work. When you're engaging the students and saying, we need to put you into the field, and then you come back, what are the learning outcomes? And I think that I do understand from, and I'm speaking as a student, I think that there's a power dynamic because number one, maybe you don't have 5 students per teacher to sort of follow you up. It's probably one teacher who is in charge of 200 students. They're all going into community. They're all going to do this and this. Nobody's having a conversation with a student on, okay, so what were your learning outcomes last week and so on. And I think that it might be very difficult, but I'm saying if we are going to have return on investment, I think there has to be a lot more investment in this community outreach program. I think that is critical. The second thing I wanted to discuss is students are from different places, you know. I used to come from Kigali, Uganda, someone comes from Gulu, someone comes from different places. People have different economic means. We used to have a bus, I remember, that used to take us to town, and then you get distributed into your different, you go to your different places. And the nature of work is that there's going to be abuse. You're going to have these bosses who think this is a little 21-year-old that I can, take advantage of, I can, Nobody ever said, if you encounter this situation, this is who to speak to. Nobody. Of course, we were older and you knew better, but I'm saying, what if somebody was more vulnerable than I was? But these advances are there. But I think that when you're doing community engagement, we have to look at the whole picture. What do I want? What is going to be my students' experience at this place? What are going to be the learning outcomes? What if she doesn't have transport back? What if, I think that they have, and I think that I do agree, there's a problem of funding. So there's definitely going to be a big funding gap. So I know that I've spent quite a bit of time speaking about me as a student, but then I also, I had from that presentation something that's very critical. So what I'm saying is that the intention is there, the programs are there. I think a little bit more has to be done in terms of practice. So like, for example, here, when we say community engagement, there has to be a lot of stakeholder participation to develop new programs, to increase the knowledge base at universities. The intention are there. I guess even the practice is there. But as an employer, I am not seeing it. What do I want as an employer? The world has changed. And the feedback that you want, what you want from young students is not what you're really getting. Bosses want quick decision makers. People don't have time. You want a student who is, even if you're a lawyer or an accountant, someone who can put together a quick dashboard to discuss trends. So this happened last week and this happened, whatever. So therefore what I think is this and this. Students are not able to do that. When they come into the field, it's something that we now have to start teaching them on how to tailor them to the workplace. If the intention is to go to industry and say, what does industry want? Or what does the communities want? And then have a loophole and let's put this into our curriculum. I don't know whether that feedback is coming back so that these are engaged into your curriculum. So there is what? So the other thing that is very critical, so I said quick decision making. We know that data is the new currency. The kids that come, whatever, they're terrified of data. They don't understand they don't know how to make sense of existing data. It doesn't matter what field you're in. This is what it is. This is what the new world is. The new world is data driven. Do students understand how to make sense of data? Can they analyze data? And it doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, you're going to have to deal with data. Is this something that is being put into the system? The second thing is, we know that I feel like universities are built to enhance the IQ of the students. But the world today is actually, EQ is even more important. How do you present yourselves? How do you present your argument? How do you come forward? How do you relate with people? How do you negotiate your way through a situation? How do you, you find, the new world is, when you're making how do I negotiate with you so that we both feel good about the win? Because you're all supposed to come out like, I think I was a winner, I think I was a winner. But I don't know whether these things are being taught in schools, because maybe they are, because as I said, I've been a student so many years ago and I'm not a lecturer, but I'm just saying the outcome, I'm not seeing that in the students that are developed, Confidence, communication, putting your point forward, writing in a very articulate way. And unfortunately, I feel like universities elsewhere, Brown University, Harvard University, all these universities, I don't know whether there is something that they do differently, but if a student has come from this place and another one has come from Brown University, or, at least we have employed both. And you can see that these students are a bit more agile. They're not smarter by any means, not smarter at all. What they are is that they're able to understand what the employer wants today. They're being trained for today's employment. So and also maybe the third important thing is, I guess, confidence. People come in, they're not, you know, they are really smart. This is the best student in this class. And then you come out, okay, tell me about yourself. They don't know how to properly introduce themselves. They don't know how to put their best forward. They're not, you know, they haven't been learned how to navigate the system and stuff like that. And I didn't want to come through this conversation as someone who is knowledgeable from a lecturer perspective. I'm a lay person in the community that you're trying to engage. And what I'm saying is that maybe you're engaging, it's not translating to the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think as it was advised, we move to the other presentations before we come back to the questions and interactions. So the next presentation is by Professor Mohamed Sheikh from Commission for Science and Technology in Tanzania. So Professor, you briefly introduce yourself and then you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Thank you. You are most welcome. Professor Mohamed, are you around?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to be invited in this important meeting. Secretariat, could you turn on my video, please? Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mohamed Sheikh. I'm working with the Commission for Science and Technology. I have been working as a Director of Research Coordination and Promotion, as well as Director of Physical Sciences. I have advantage of working as academia, as Associate Professor in Analytical Chemistry and Ecotoxicology at the State University of Zanzibar. In this discussion, I have two experiences, to be academia as well as a knowledge broker working with the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology, which also is a granting council. So I have been interacting with policymakers, academia, as well as community. So I will try to talk in this perspective, not as academia per se, not as community, but also someone who is working closer with different nodes of the society. First of all, I would like to register my acknowledgement to Inter-University Council of West Africa. Indeed, this is very crucial theme towards serving and solving socioeconomic growth within East African bloc. But also Secretariat has done a wonderful job with Keynote Speaker. I think she laid out the whole way of this discussion, and great job from you, Professor Juma. First of all, for the interest of time, I would like to stress on how the community engagement, how the methodologies. I will add on the previous speaker of Keynote Speaker, but from research perspective, as working in the granting council, community engagement is no longer option. This actually is a mandatory for almost all granting council to make sure that there is impact of research funding, particularly because most of funding taxpayers' money. So we need some accountability of this money, and definitely the one who are paying tax, which are basically community, they have to see the value of their money. And there are several methods in addition to that, those who have been mentioned by the keynote speaker. For example, co-design. Most of researchers or academia, they are not involving, particularly for community-based research. Someone from US can come to the very remote village and try to embed the research without co-designing with that relevant community. And this starting from research design up to knowledge translation and ethical issues. And this is very dangerous because as many communities, the issue of indigenous knowledge, which is extremely critical to the research itself. And it's not good if you are going to embed some research idea without having knowledge of that particular community that they are going to be researched. And consultation is extremely important because when you conduct research, you have to consult to that targeted community, whether your results will be benefit for these guys or not. And you may conduct research, but when you are going to have interest of research uptake, it will be a disaster because definitely the targeted community may not be interested on your results. But also community can be involved as advisory committee, also can act as a peer researchers and even can act as collaborators. Why not in data analysis during interpretation and research dissemination. And right now there is a concept of beyond university gates. I think this is quite common for East Africa, South Africa and Europe. And these provide educational services such as online courses, MOOC, massive online courses to the community. And it worked well during, especially during the COVID-19. But this is more or less a one-way, it's not reciprocal from community to the academia or from community to the researchers. So it should be the way in such a way that there is reciprocal between these two ends. I mean, community side and the research side. And we should avoid parachuting research, as have already been mentioned, that you are just going with your idea without consultation of the community and what you think is right. So definitely it will not be healthy in the higher learning institution and research institution, as well as to the community. And recently there is one concept of helicopter research. I think we may all eyewitness, someone is going to collect data to the certain community, but after collecting data, after publications, and never return back to the community. And this is referred as helicopter research. I think we might be a witness of this phenomena, that someone is collecting data, but the community doesn't get the feedback. There is no feedback loop on what have you been collected, what has been analyzed from your research, but there is no feedback to the community. So definitely academia or researchers have benefited from this process, while the community has not. In some cases, community have even experienced harm because there is issue of exposure. You have exposed some changes. If you are conducting health research to the community, that means there are some health information that you are going to be published somewhere while there is nothing come back to the community. And for the interest of time again, I am going to consider two case studies from my experience from Tanzania. The case one is about innovation quadruple helix model. I think we are aware of this. Innovation quadruple helix model. This is a special model where university, industry, government, and community are working together. Definitely academia, they can't work alone in silo. They need support from industries, because if you are going to generate some product, of course, at the end of the day, we need mass production. Definitely industries are needed. But also government, there are some policies of government. Any production, industrial production, they have to be guided under government policies. So government or policymakers have to be included, or they have to be involved during the process, from academia, industry, and community, who are the one who are consumers, the one who detects marketing and everything. So when you get this combination, university, industry, government, and community, which is a pillar of any knowledge generation in terms of consumption of the knowledge product. And for the case of Tanzania in particular, there is a 10-year study which shows that they have established almost 26 clusters. There is a concept of innovative clusters, which is coming from triple helix and now have changed to quadruple helix. That means academia, they are working with community, they're working with government, they are working together in certain problem in order to improve weather processes, production, and other stuff. So for Tanzania, they're up to 2015, from 2026, in this time period of 10 years, there is about 67 innovative clusters, basically, which are based in agricultural production, almost 60%, manufacturing 25%, and the rest like tourism and ICT 5%. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a good model in terms of innovation, that academia, they are working with the government, they are working with community engagement. So already in Tanzania, it has already been mentioned that in developing curriculum, when they engage graduate students, but also in particular in innovation, there is already some homework done in terms of engagement, functional engagement between community and higher learning institution or academia. Let me point out a specific example. There is one region, there was a rice cluster, and there was a problem of production of rice. At the same time, there was a loss of aroma in this rice. So the community started this program, this problem, and then they're working with Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology. So we brought in higher learning institution and research institution with support of CEDA, and working for quite some time. And what was the outcome then? The results, the production of rice shoot to 6 to 7 times. So the problem started with community, but at the end of the day was solved with this combination, with this set of actors, active actors, including Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology, which is basically a knowledge broker, but also there was a university and research, agricultural research institutes and community who are main owner of the problem. So the production shoot to 6 to 7 times at the beginning. So this is just one example in terms of innovation clusters. But the case 2 is about seaweed. I think most of us were aware on seaweed. These are plants under waters, and they are very important, and they're used for medicines, they're used for construction industry and others. So the research started, seaweed research started in 1960s by one professor called Shigeni when he did his PhD at the University of Hawaii in US. So from 1960s up to 2006, community, actually, they were not aware of this, the wealth that they're there, which are seaweed. And the community gets started in Zanzibar in 2006, where 18 farms and 10 villages started on 2013. As we speak, there are about 23,000 farmers of seaweed, and they are getting benefit from this research of seaweed. And interestingly, most of them, about 90%, are women. So it's clearly that if there is an engagement of community and academia, definitely the impact of higher learning institution will be very obvious. So I would like to congratulate Institute of Marine Science, University of Dar es Salaam, that have been conducting this engagement between community and academia for quite long, since 2006 until today. And absolutely it has been changing the landscape of community engagement in terms of research and academic activities. So, Mr. Chair, I'm winding up. I have few recommendations regarding to how we can strengthen, more engagement, how academia can be more active to community engagement. For example, we have ethical review boards. Keynote speaker has mentioned that there is research policies, but also during the ethical review board, as we know that most of research or academics before conducting research, they have to be approved by ethical review boards. I think it's high time to make sure that they include community engagement is a key factor, is a key component when you review your research for ethical review board. But also research translation. Most of academics are curious to conduct research. They want to conduct research and to publish for the sake of getting promotion. As it has been mentioned or highlighted by keynote speakers, keynote speaker, Professor Sibuga, that it should be considered for promotion, but you have to show that how you translated your research and how you have made the impact. Not only is not to engage, you have to show the impact. I think the keyword should not be engagement. It should be impact to community, because you can engage, but you have no impact. So research translation, because our community, if you're working on drug discovery, at the end of the day, community are the main consumer of your drug. So you have to show the impact. Your engagement should be very active and should be very effective in order to create that impact. Mr. Chair, we should consider how to involve community during design of the research. So we should adopt co-designed methodology for all community-based research to make sure that there is ownership on what you are going to do by the certain community. And community should be at the central point in community demand-oriented innovation and research. So, Mr. Chair, these are a few recommendations, which is a reflection of the keynote speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mohammed, for this presentation, and also thank you for the recommendations. I hope we have a chance to discuss all this and to see how they could be integrated in the way forward. So I will now invite the third panelist. It is Professor Christine Dranzoa, Vice Chancellor of Moon University. So Professor, you briefly introduce yourself and then you make the presentation for approximately 10 minutes. Most welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Moderator. I bring you greetings from Moon University in Arua, Uganda. And I want to thank the Secretariat for identifying Moni to participate actively in this celebration of the 50th year of our existence. Moderator and members, my name is Christine Dranzoa, and I am the Vice Chancellor of Muni University, as you stated. I'm a wildlife scientist by background, but also one of the committee members on the Inter-University Council for East Africa Committee of Scholarships and Students Committee. The subject of discussion is a very interesting one, and I want to briefly highlight what the keynote speaker has brought forward in terms of what community engagement is all about in the nexus of higher education. From my understanding, she was very articulate that this is a sustainable network of partnerships and activities between higher education institutions and communities at various levels, at local, national, regional, and international levels. And she also summarized that this relationship could be formal and informal, and I allude to all that. I want to emphasize the importance of higher education. And I think this is very key for all of us to understand that higher education has a purpose in the development of our African continent. Because universities, especially at the highest level of education, in generating knowledge, in interrogating issues that pertain to communities, societies, investors, partners, and name it. And therefore, my understanding is that universities have to take leadership in the socioeconomic development of our region. That being the case, for us to be able to undertake realistic, sustainable, and quality community involvement, what should we, first of all, look at? The presenter was very, very clear. She gave us preconditions for sustainable community engagement. And if I can draw your attention to what she highlighted, she was very, very strong about policy frameworks that must precede community engagement. She also mentioned issues of strategies of how community engagement should be pursued. These are preliminary preparations for higher education. And I want to give, for every aspect that I will bring forward, I am going to give local cases or local examples for the members to appreciate. Where do we start from? How do we move forward? If it is talking about policy frameworks, do we start the policy when we have already established the universities, or it starts with the establishment of the university? I want to give you a typical example of Moni University. Moni University could be described as a community-linked university which is public, established by an act of parliament in 2013 after local leaders and local communities emphasized the importance of establishing a public university in northwestern Uganda. And so the role and responsibilities of Moni University has been articulated in the establishment framework. That is the instrument which established Moni, was very articulate and defined the role of Moni to develop human resources appropriate for a decentralized system of governance, and also to establish human resource that can manage the education systems, the health systems of both Uganda and the region at large. What does that mean? That means at a framework level, the university's accountability goes back from that establishment structure, to the extent that if the university doesn't reflect on this system, then the leadership will have to answer to the authorities that may be. I also want to allude to the previous speakers' concerns about the policies of ethical nature, which involves research, and every institution worth its name has to have ethical committee to the extent that the research or activities that are undertaken must meet the engagement needs in an appropriate manner. I also want to take the discussion from the contextual aspect, especially in Uganda, where community engagement is completely integrated as a way of service with teaching and learning, as a way of knowledge interrogation through research and innovations, and I think also by addressing the inequalities or the gaps there is in all the disciplines that we can talk of. And from the presentation of the keynote speaker, I could easily summarize that she also talked about the approaches, the various approaches that universities and other tertiary institutions use in the engagement of communities, that is via partnerships, community outreach programs, students internship or attachment, which my sister Sivon, I want to say she lamented so much about, but that also takes us back to designs. How do we design the community approach? What frameworks do universities have before they send students for attachment, whether in industries or local communities or name it? Because without that, we cannot measure the outcomes of their learning, and to which I am very familiar with. Establishments of relationships and collaborations with investments or business ventures. Professor Mohammed mentioned things about the triple helix approach, and I am going to give you a case study again where I come from, because from the policy level, Muni University was established on a green field. What does that mean? Muni, the Ministry of Education got a few of us and said, go and establish a public university in West Nile region, and without touching an existing institution. And you can imagine if we didn't take the triple helix approach, where we bring government, the local communities, the private sector, and other partners to the same table, and discuss and engage in areas of how do we move forward in establishing a university from the scratch. And because we had this policy that we must start from a green field, the local communities in this region became our saviors by giving land. In other words, land resourcing is not only mandate of the universities or institutions, but resourcing can be collectively done in that triple helix approach by bringing all the players together that has been demonstrated by Muni University. And the various approaches of let's say, tracer studies. The tracer studies in this country is a mandatory process managed by National Council or monitored by National Council for Higher Education, that for every programmatic area that a university starts, there has to be involvement of the community from the highest level to the lowest level, to bring on board relevance, because there has been a lot of complaints that universities in East African region or the continent are not, providing skills to the students. There is a mismatch between skill sets and the skill sets and demand by the industry. What that means is we have to get the involvement of other players, other stakeholders when we are doing curriculum designs. And this has been so because without showing evidence that we are doing consultations with communities to find out their needs, National Council for Higher Education, especially for the case of Uganda, will not accredit a program of that nature. So the approach of triple helix is a very important step for piggybacking on how we proceed with the little resources in management of our community engagement. The area of research and development. The areas of research and development for a very long time in the African context or East Africa has been purely driven by funding agencies. And that, I think we all understand why that is the case, because of our limitations of funding. Now, what that brings on board is the challenge of doing the challenge of pulse research, because we cannot have a continuum in research and development when we don't have funding. So when initiating community-linked research, we therefore have to look at where are the sources of the research funding, if it is R&D. can we sustain the researches without funding? Those are areas that we have to look at. But at the same time, I think that challenge should come back to the East African community as a way forward. Funding, deliberate funding for research and development should be a major undertaking for our states so that the universities can play their community roles. And I want to bring to the members the issues of teaching and learning and curriculum design, which is linked to addressing societal needs wherever a university is located. Muni, for example, is in the Albertine Graben, which is where the oil and gas industry is. So from that perspective, the councils must look into what sort of curricula addresses the local needs. Is it environmental impact assessments, or is it high power skills in gas and oil industry, so that the communities are brought on board so that they can help government in monitoring the development, be it through gas and oil and gas or other agricultural undertakings. Now, when we are looking at institutions that are running community outreach, we have to look at the disciplines that there are, which are being run in the university. But it is very important to take note that at institutional level, when there is no coordination, then you will have a disjunct way of community approach. The health department or health faculties or education faculties would be doing their different approaches. In Moni, we have a policy framework that every department, every unit of the university must have an element of community approach and community interface. And it is very important that staff are oriented to understand the needs of the local areas, but also the international discourse, so that whatever is designed falls in sync with what is expected at both local and regional level. Communities also bring nexus for peace and investment, because universities rather, because universities are neutral entities where knowledge is gathered and shared with the general public, irrespective of political dispensation or religious undertones and leaning. And Moni has demonstrated this by hosting regional symposium where investors are brought together with to integrate and to interface with local communities. And so the impact has been vast. The communities are now engaging with international investors to address their needs. And these are some of the, some of the local initiatives that can be.
Professor, 3 minutes left.
Yes, I am about to conclude, sir. Yeah, so these approaches of engaging the public for the greater good of not only the university students, but also the local people, the local investors, regional investors, is very, very important. I totally agree with the challenges that have been raised by our keynote speaker. But I would like to bring on board the COVID-19 challenge, which has affected higher education big time. We cannot, turn our faces around and not talk about the impact of COVID on higher education and socioeconomic stance. And we need to put our heads together. That has to be presented to the Inter-University Council Board as well as the East African community. I think for a way forward, funding is very important. Addressing community issues at establishment, institutional establishment, just as I have alluded in Monique's, is something which can be undertaken. And then also having a structured and coordinated system, because what doesn't get measured doesn't count. Chair, moderator, and members, it has been a pleasure speaking to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll come back to this through questions and answers. Now it is my pleasure to invite the next presenter, Dr. Emile Bienvenu, Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, University of Rwanda. Please introduce yourself briefly, and you have around 10 minutes for your presentation. Most welcome, bienvenue. Actually, bienvenue.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from University of Rwanda. My name is Emile Bienvenu. I hold a PhD in medical science from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, in the area of clinical pharmacology. And I also completed a research attachment at McGill University in Canada, where I contributed to the project on alternative modeling in intellectual property systems in biotechnology innovations. In addition to teaching in the School of Medicine and Pharmacy at University of Rwanda, I served as director of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And currently, as you said, moderator, I serve as the acting deputy vice chancellor for academic affairs and research at University of Rwanda. Being the last speaker, I will only focus on one item related to policies and strategy when it comes to deal with community engagement by higher education institutions, just to avoid the repetitions and also to the concept of community university engagement by definition is easy to understand, but in my opinion, putting it into practice becomes a big challenge to many high education institutions in the region. In my opinion, the challenge is to find effective ways of collaboration between university and the community, effective ways of introducing the collaboration between universities and industry, and effective ways of applying knowledge for the public interest. There should be actually strong strategic programs of community university engagement, and those programs should be strongly and jointly developed with the collaboration, the participation of the community and the industry. And those programs should actually end innovation activities They should be integrated in those activities when it comes to designing programs in high learning institutions. And the implementation of those programs should have clear indicators, and those indicators should actually be continuously monitored. What I observed in our universities in the region, we tended to develop good policies. You will see that many universities have developed good research policies, and a few of them will have developed good outreach policies, but strategies and implementation programs are actually lacking. And those who attempted to develop those programs, they are not actually monitored to make sure that they produce impact, because that is what actually is needed. Having a policy, having a strategy is good, but it should be implemented and produce the impact. It is very important to shift from traditional university systems to modern systems by introducing innovation in university activities. As I said, many universities have good research policies, outreach policies, and promotion policies. But it is very important to revise those policies and other existing policies to put together a number of items in those policies to allow complementarity and to avoid contradictions. One example is that we always talk about making impact as a university, engaging in solving community challenges, community problems. And this will imply being innovative, coming up with solutions, with innovations that can solve community problems. But when you look at when you look at promotion policies we all have in our universities, innovation is not taken into consideration when promoting academic staff. And I believe that it is possible to operate drastic changes and revise existing policies and align our policies to the current move of our universities. For example, at University of Rwanda, we very recently revised our academic promotion policy, and innovation was one of the elements that was introduced in promotion criteria. We developed an innovation policy and innovation strategy, and we are currently developing a university industry collaboration strategy just to make sure that we have clear indicators and we have indicators responding to the problems faced by our community. Because we all tend to believe that engaging the industry is only by means of conducting together some research projects. If we engage the community, if we engage the industry in our research, that is good, but this should not be the only indicator we can consider. Someone talked about reviewing curriculum. The question here is to know, when we review our curriculum, when we design new programs, to what extent do we engage, do we involve the industry? You will see that a few universities do that. Programs are developed internally in universities and they are reviewed internally in universities. And this creates actually a disconnection between universities and the industry. Another indicator, which in my opinion is even very simple, is the engagement in continuous professional development. How often universities get involved in those CPDs, continuous professional programs, you will see that very few universities are involved in those programs. So I think it is very important to revise the policies you have to put together all the elements that are in those policies to avoid contradictions and to ensure complementarity. And all these actually goes together with clarifying the mission of the university, whether you want your university to be an educational university, or whether you want it to be a research university, or whether you want it to be a solution university, or an entrepreneurial university, or a combination of one or two items. So you will see that the policies you have do not actually align to the vision and the mission of the university. And these contradictions actually create a disconnection between what we aim at doing and what we do. And in this way, there is no way of effectively collaborating with the industry and getting engaged in solving community problems. So those are very few comments, Chair, I wanted to make during this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. We have now completed the series of panel presentations. So the next item on the program is question and answers. We have approximately, I think, around 50 minutes for that. So what I suggest, maybe we should just open the floor and maybe take a first list of people who wants to ask questions or make comments, and then we'll move. Once we finish with that, we take the second list and so on. Unless Secretariat is advising differently, I think we should go
Chair,
that way. So Secretariat, any?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have been collecting the questions.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to read you maybe a set of 5 questions that have come from the members. And once they deal with those, then we can read the others until we exhaust them.
Okay.
Many of them, I must say, are comments, very nice comments. People are very happy with the presentations. And I want to thank everyone for their contributions. I also take the opportunity to thank the speakers for their very clear presentations. I would also like to take this opportunity, even before I give you the question, Chair, just to recognize the fact that I'm very happy to see that a lot of students that are participating in our scholarship programs are also here in this program, and they are contributing. And this is very encouraging. Keep it up, good students. So now let me share with you a few of the questions that have come, Chair.
Yes.
Once I get to 5, you can stop me. The first question came from Richard Ouma. And Richard Ouma is asking Professor Sibuga, would you like to throw some more light on the issue of institutionalizing community engagement in curriculum? Then I have one question that came from Leah Komen. And it's an interesting question because in this presentation, we had more of scientists making presentations, perhaps with the exception of Dr. Shivon, who is a lawyer. She didn't mention that, but she's a lawyer. And what Leah Komen is asking, he says, it is often easier to see how hard sciences, research can contribute to societal problems, in such areas as getting vaccines and things like that. But what would be the tangible contribution of soft sciences and humanities be? Could you elucidate on some of these contributions? And maybe we can combine this with the next question that came, or comment that came from Ignace Gatere, who agreed with Siobhan and said that we need to embed emotional intelligence in our curriculum. In addition to enhancing the IQ of our students, this may need innovation in the way we conduct assessment and grading. And probably we can see that in the context of ways in which social sciences and humanities would also help to embed emotional intelligence in our students. The next question, Chair, is asking, in higher education can engage the community by plowing back, as it were, say having graduates go back to these communities and build capacities and the like. What is the place of language communities in these interactions between higher education and the community? I think that connects with the other question of humanities and languages. The next question I would like to go to came from Dr. Peter Mathuki. Dr. Peter Mathuki is the Executive Director of the East African Business Council. So his question is very relevant and also related to what that council does. And he says, good presentation, but what about deliberate universities' engagement with the private sector? So I think the key word there is the deliberate, probably even continuous, and probably we can look at that, that as well. Then I have one more question. I think after I ask this one, we can open up to the contributors. So this question is a very interesting one. Came from Mwalimu Mshesh. Mwalimu Mshesh has been very active. Thank you very much for your contributions. And he's asking this question to Professor Mohammed. And the question is about indigenous knowledge. The question he asked, must it be found out there in the communities, or should it be resident in the institutions? At ARU, I imagine that means Africa Rural University, we have professors from the communities. These are people whose repository of cultural and traditional knowledge are not in books. They are moving encyclopedias. We call them traditional wisdom specialists. We enable them to teach together with conventional academics in specialized areas like ethnomedicine. What do you have to say about this? I'll leave it there and then we can go to the others later.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we should invite the keynote speaker and also panelists to react to this, and then we take it from there. So keynote speaker, Professor, do you want to make any comments or respond to this?
Kallunde Pilly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think there was a question. There was a specific question to me by Richard Auma to throw light on institutionalization of community engagement in curricula. And what I mean here is that currently we send students for community engagement during practical training, but all that they earn is either pass or fail with no credit. And what I mean is, and therefore you find that this is my own feeling, that some students don't take those training sessions seriously because they know that it's just a pass or fail. And as Siobhan pointed out earlier, we usually send these students and ask the local staff there to be the supervisors or the daily supervisors, and also give a mark at the end. Now we are asking somebody who probably has never marked anybody before to give us a, so I think we don't know exactly what happened, but there could be some issues of complacency and everything. So what I mean is, if community engagement can be given the same weight as any other course that is taken at the university campus, I believe students would be more innovative and would be more proactive, and the academic staff will also be more serious in trying to determine where these students lie. So that's what I meant, that it should not just be a matter of pass or fail, which in most cases doesn't give that much weight to that particular aspect of training as it does to other courses where students know they have to attain a certain pass mark in order to be considered to have passed the course. That's what I meant.
Okay.
And yeah.
Are you through? So then we can invite.
Yes, that was the specific question to me. But
Yes.
if you allow me, I can continue a little bit just to react to some of the. Yes, the last comment from not the last, the one from Dr. Peter Madhuki, who asked about what about deliberate university engagement with the private sector. I should say that we are already doing that to a certain extent. When we say we send students to practical training, we don't just send them to public institutions. We also send them to private organizations. Of course, we communicate with them before, ask if they will be willing to accept students, and if they are, then we send them. And here, for example, here in Morogoro, for Sokoine University, if I can give a very local example, there's a local NGO which actually has been collaborating with the university, accepting students for practical training. And during those periods, students interact directly with the farmer groups. They interact, and in the course of interaction, together with the farmers, they raise challenges that need solutions. And eventually those students come back to the university and take them up together with their supervisors to try and find solutions to those problems which came out of the interaction between farmers and students through the facilitation of a private institution. So we do that to a certain extent.
Thank you.
So, Siobhan here.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think that there were a couple of questions that were sort of like speaking to sort of like speaking to sort of the same sort of theme about deliberate engagement, about there's clarity on scientific contribution to society, but how about the arts and amenities and so on, and something related to emotional intelligence. I wanted to say that it is true that a lot has been done in terms of community engagement, but we know that, for example, research is more focused on than, for example, the community engagement, although we all realize it's very critical. And this is probably in part because of the reward attached to it. Indeed, if you're doing research and leads to some scientific, breakthrough, then there's a lot of, rewards attached to that. Somebody also spoke about how that leads to potentially promotion, like, I've done this X number of research doing to that. What is the reward attached to community engagement? Why would I be, as a lecturer, why would I have X number of students to teach, to mark, to do that. What is in it for me to take this seriously? So I think that there has to be, I don't know, I feel like if you attach reward or a benefit to something, then people are going to focus at that more on that. So I think that there has to be some sort of, I don't know whether reward or benefit. I don't know whether lecturers get a credit. I don't know how they, again, I've never been in the academic world, but whether they would get some reward or promotion, or I don't know, anything that would support them to have community engagement. And I think that it is only, if we can't just talk about it as something that is very critical, unless we are willing to put on table the things that make it necessary for the people that would do it to benefit from it. That's one thing. The other thing is, yes, there's been talk of, we send students, we engage industry, both public and private sector. But for what? What are the learning outcomes? How is it going to practically be done? Is there a weekly, monthly report that is coming through? Is there, are we forcing, or are we having conversations with the industry to say, I'm sending you my 3 students, these are the learning outcomes, please take me through how my students are going to achieve what it is that they are looking to achieve. I think that unless we think practically about how this community engagement will be done, and I'm speaking specifically about industry in terms of placements and employment, I think it's a lot, it's a bit more clear if students are going to do some sort of farm work in communities, grassroots sort of communities. I think that those have been done very well, but I think that where there has to be a bit more thinking is industry in terms of placement and employment. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much. Any other contributions from panelists?
Chair, I would like to add to the issue of social sciences versus the hard sciences or STEM-I and its contribution. I think there is an emerging trend that most universities have come to integrate social sciences, aspects of social sciences, also understanding society, social skills, and integrating this with other cross-cutting issues like of environmental conservation, gender, for purposes of lifelong learning, even to the scientists. And so the contribution of humanities towards building a holistic graduate cannot be undermined. I think most universities now are integrating the cross-cutting courses so that the outcome of graduates would be able to, graduates will be able to relate with society, whether they are in industry or they remain within university environment. Those contribute to formation of a holistic graduate. And you see this, even if you have IT students, when you integrate the soft skills, what most people call soft skills training, you find them being able to navigate wherever they go. And so we probably need to integrate those courses in the main programs that we offer to our students. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you
Yes.
very much. I would like to reflect on the philosophical question from Mr. Mwalimu. This is a very difficult question, I have to admit. But what is important is to tap this indigenous knowledge. We know that there is a massive knowledge which are not documented, and you can't find in repository of universities or other research institutions. But, and I don't think that there is a mathematical equation to retrieve this indigenous knowledge. But rather, I will propose or suggest to have an effective framework to tap this indigenous knowledge from communities to institutions. And it's very tricky. It's really tricky because you have to gain trust from community in order to get this indigenous knowledge. Otherwise, you will end up with very shallow wealth concerning to indigenous knowledge. So, Mr. Mwalimu, I think you are doing a very good job having professor from community to have this traditional wisdom to your institution, and keep it up.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Emile, bienvenue. Do you like to make any comments?
Yes, I just want to, I had no specific question, but I just want to emphasize that, you know, universities in the region have a critical mass of trained skills, trained scientists, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are good in linking with the industry and linking with, you know, the community. Any university should be thinking on how, you know, to raise the skills of their academic staff in engaging with the community, in collaborating with the community. Because we do have a good number of scientists who have very good ideas, but who develop, you know, very good research from their offices. But you will see that this kind of research is not impactful because there is no co-creation, as it was highlighted in this meeting. If there is no co-creation in developing research topics, in looking at what are the relevant problems to be solved, then we will always have this connection between universities and the community and the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Korea, what shall we do now? Shall we take the next list or allow also participants to make comments on this first list?
I think we allow the, we go to the next round.
Yes.
Since participants are engaging on the forum, if they raise issues there, we'll pick them up.
Okay.
Otherwise, it may be difficult because we have over 180 people attending. But however, Mr. Chairman, I think we can also let them know that there is an icon on their screen. And if someone really feels that they really want to speak, they can put up their hand, we'll give them an opportunity. But meanwhile, we have their questions so we can share them.
Fine.
So if I can go to the next round of questions, Chair.
Yes, please.
There are some interesting questions here around the issue of COVID and technology. So I want to begin with the person who began first, that is Mpesa Mihigo. And he says that community engagement is often relegated due to non-grading of the output or grade component having minimal effect on the final GPA. And the question is, how do we deal with an enhanced community engagement university using digital technologies? So COVID-19 has brought real physical interaction issues. What happens in the future and how do we leverage the available technology? And I think that goes together with a question that was asked by Robert. And Robert is asking the question, what are the shifts in university community engagement under the new current normal? And how can universities engage under the government restriction on COVID containment? Are there any innovation tools? Then there is the question, interesting question from Mary Kimani. And Mary Kimani, I think, is challenging universities. He says it is extremely disturbing that in this age and time, universities in the region remain shut when the rest of the world continue to learn. And asking, how do our university dons feel when they are receiving salaries, whether partial or whole, when students continue to lose? And the question she asks is, have we lost significance in the community? We should be setting the pace for others to follow. I guess she's asking, what can we do to make sure that in such times as this, we share with the communities and help them move on? How do we do that? Then we have one question that's not related to that issue now. This is from Jonathan Bwambo, as one of the staff members at IUCEA. He's addressing this question to the keynote speaker. And he says, well, IUCEA has had its share of successes in higher education development in the region. What is your fair assessment of IUCEA in higher education community engagement what do you think should be done differently or should be improved? And the last one in this round, Chair, is from Professor Mawa, and he addresses his question to Professor Sibuga as well. And he says, could you give more comments on the key concern that community engagement in many universities is not structured and centrally coordinated? Different faculties and colleges conduct community engagement activities in isolation of other academic units within the same institution. So he's asking for your comment on that. I submit those, Chair, and then we can bring the others a little later.
Thank you very much. So I should like to invite the keynote speaker to start with responding to some of these questions and comments. Professor Sibuga.
Yes, I'll begin with the last two questions by Dr. Mbwambo on what IUCEA can do more to stimulate community engagement. I think I pointed out in my presentation that, and some other speakers have added to it, that as long as community engagement activities are not given the relevant weight when it comes to promotion, it will always be downplayed. And because everybody wants to advance, and they would want to advance by concentrating on the high impact activities like publishing and so on and so forth. So IUCEA can actually come in as an umbrella organization and start a dialogue with the vice chancellors on how they can improve on their promotion criteria to include or give the due weight to community engagement, because it's not an easy thing engaging in communities, because they have their own priorities and they are sometimes skeptical. So you have to gain their trust and so on before you are able to do something meaningful. So it's not an easy task. So unless it is given its importance, it's considered to be an important aspect, and somebody could actually be promoted on the basis of community engagement and so on and so forth, I think that would be a good contribution from the Inter-University Council of East Africa through the national commissions for universities, and finally with the vice chancellors of those universities in the region. They were able to do this on quality assurance, and now quality assurance is common in I believe in all universities in East Africa, is common practice. So I'm sure they can do this also if they set out to do it. From Professor Mawa you wanted a comment on the concern that community engagement is not structured. Yes, my feeling is that if you read the policy guideline, like from many universities, they'll say engage with communities from the beginning and so on and so forth. So, and then it is left to the individual staff on how to go about it. I mentioned in my presentation, maybe I didn't, but staff need to be retooled on how to deal with communities so that they are able to engage in communities following accepted procedures and so on. And therefore, when we say that it should be structured, we mean that right from the curriculum, the aspect of curriculum community engagement should be included, so that students also who are going to be part of the community and will be making these communities leave universities already knowing what is expected of them outside the university setting. So both students and staff need to be retooled so that they can understand better these aspects, because many of us are from hard sciences, as somebody say, and in hard sciences there are certain principles and procedures that are followed, but in the social sciences, I think we need more retooling, more orientation, and not only staff but also students, and not only students in extension or something like that. I believe this should be all students, like we do for communication, and so communication skills, IT skills nowadays, and so on and so forth. So that's what I meant by. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next one, please, from panelists. Any comments?
Chair, I just want to comment on, there is a question which came according to which in many universities, community engagement activities are uncoordinated. I strongly agree with the one who asked this question, because this is my observation too. You will see that in so many universities, a good number of activities in this line are going on. Efforts are being deployed, but they are not focused to a clear goal, and they are not coordinated. You will see that so many units, so many universities, even admin units, admin offices are involved in different activities, but in a way that is uncoordinated. I think the only way of solving this is, first of all, as I mentioned, to have strategies, to have a policy, and to have an office, coordinating and harmonizing all those activities. I visited last year University of Technology in Tokyo, and I've seen that they have a very strong office in charge of university industry collaboration. And I was very glad because all innovation and research activities were actually coordinated under that office. I'm not saying that design is the best, but in the region, we need to be having offices coordinating all those initiatives. Otherwise, if you look at what is happening now, they are scattered, and establishing a unit, an office coordinating all those activities and having relevant policies in that line would solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the panelists? I think.
Hello?
Chair. Hello.
Have we lost the chair? Just carry on, Christine. I'll hold brief as you see whether the chair comes back.
Yes, I was. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There is an issue raised on technology and how do we address ourselves in this situation of COVID? How can universities or institutions remain relevant to the communities? Of course, this is a very challenging situation for most higher education institutions, and it requires multifaceted approach. Most universities are right now trying to migrate from traditional teaching system to online or other system, but at the same time, they are challenges that our governments have to address their minds. And mostly the issues are related to infrastructure. The ICT infrastructures in upcountry stations or rural areas is very limited. And that goes hand in hand with challenges with power. In fact, starting this meeting, I was very apprehensive, thinking that anytime power will go off and I will fall out of the system. But thank God we have run very well for today. Now, if we are able to address the infrastructure situation, universities definitely should be able, this is the most testing period of our lives, to see how can the universities support the learning systems at lower levels. How can we provide internet services or even train teachers in IT to be able to reach out the most vulnerable. And my take here is really that is the most very gray area, especially for those of us in rural setups, gray area for the entire education system from the lowest to the highest, and we can only address when we approach them holistically. That is the comment I wanted to make on that one, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Panelists? If not, maybe we should move to the next round of questions.
Thank you, Chair. Before we do that, I have two people who would like to make some intervention.
Okay.
And, with your permission, Chair, I think we can allow them.
Yes.
The first one is Professor Hulda Swai. If you're still, and I saw your hand up, I know it's down now, but I believe that you still wanted to make an intervention. And then after you, we would like to invite Naomi Kathula, who says she would like to share her experience in Germany. But shortly, with very few words. So can we begin with Hulda Swai with the permission of Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, my intervention is on the program of postdoc. Both IUCEA and World Bank and even other universities in East Africa, we don't fund postdocs. So you find the research, the PhD research, they come up with products. But whenever they come up with products, there's no way they can continue with their products to come to prototype, incubation, spin-off, and full-fledged factories because there's no funding for postdoc. So in Europe and in South Africa, where I worked before, postdoc program is very rich and is very focused. So that's where industries comes from. So those students who have got products, they get 2 to 4 years to develop their products into prototype. So what I want to tell you, IUCEA and other universities, is we don't have postdoc programs in East Africa. And that is shortchanging us quite a lot. We get these products, like here in Nelson Mandela, we've got 30 products of students who have already gone back to their offices. They're now sitting on their offices, doing bench work and the office work, and their products are here rotting in the labs or even the computers. While if they were given the postdoc program or they were funded for postdoc, these products could have been industries. So I just want people to think seriously about funding postdoc programs. Master's PhD is fine, but let's go a bit further for postdocs so that these products can now become industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Naomi Kathula?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm from Management University of Africa, and acting registrar academics. I did yesterday when I reported to academics. I just want to share shortly, March I was invited for a training in Germany. What I saw in that, because I've also been appointed to have, you can hear me?
Yes,
you can hear.
So I had been appointed by the university to work with the TVETA so that we can have diploma programs. So on March, I was invited in Germany. When I went for that training, what impressed me most was the way the industry was working with the universities. It is an industry which deals with the materials for dentistry. So what they do, they invite the student learning dentistry, running biotechnology to the industry. You find they come there for 6 months, they do practically the work. They call it the work-based program. Not for pay, but the students are there to see practically how the bridges are done, how the material for ortho, those putting permanent teeth, how they are done. So that when they go back to the university, when they are learning the theory and learning the things they are going to use, once they are through with the program, they will be able to know when they are ordering them from Germany, from wherever, they know the process which goes to their production. And I really loved that so much. So in our African situation, if our universities can link with the industries, like now we treat, my background is agricultural education and extension. You find we teach students how to farm, how to grow avocado. But have we taken these students to even airport to see how once the marketers come and buy these avocados, what is the process which these avocados go and how do they get packaged before they are exported to Spain, to all those places they go. So I think it is high time as universities, we developed that link with the industry, with any stakeholder who is involved on what we do. So that when I teach you how to grow avocados and all this, I take you, you go and see once they are bought, how they are processed, how they are exported, how the value addition is done. And with that, you find many students will be encouraged to do the practical subjects and less doing these business related ones. Because sometimes it's the market which usually discourages students, because like agriculture, for a very long time, like I am in Kenya, you find there you get job advertised for agricultural extension officers. So you find since you go to education, you know you become an educationist. But if we were exposed to what goes on in this farming, like now you see everybody has turned to farming. So we could be having people who are hands-on, people who are entrepreneur from the college. They are not going out to look for job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I need your guidance. Can I go to the next set of questions?
Yes, please.
Maybe
yes.
the last round?
Yes.
So the next set of questions, I'll begin with Pius Achanga. And Pius Achanga appreciates the idea of the triple helix model and the need for collaborative linkages. And his question is, what frameworks can be proposed for exploration to achieve the realization of that triple heritage? I think someone even added another name. Then the next question that I have, and this is directed to IUCEA, so probably we'll look at it towards the end. But it says the universities in the East African region have been blamed for not taking the lead in national and regional development. In the Western world, community engagement plays a leading role in the national development. However, as Professor Sibuga said, in East Africa, they seem to attach little to this. And he asked, is it possible for IUCEA to engage universities under its jurisdiction? If you're not speaking, please mute your mic. So I hold up, please mute your mic. Thank you. So the question is it possible for IUCEA to engage universities under its jurisdiction to prioritize community engagement? If that is not answered, please remind me, we'll look at it a little bit towards the end. I have a question from Swaumu, and says that academic research have been very useful in identifying a number of problems facing our communities. But surprisingly, the outputs are not well disseminated to the intended societies. Findings and productive recommendations are buried into writings which are little accessed by non-specialized communities. To improve the mutual benefit between higher learning institutions and the communities, actual research needs to be emphasized, and wider dissemination of the finding to all levels in societies via various platforms. I guess that question combines with another question a little bit later, which asks, how do you make sure that the research is broken down so that the communities can be able to consume it. So it becomes inaccessible. How do we make it then accessible? Then the next question from Charles Tumuhe, which he asked, Charles asked the question, student internship is one form of community engagement. How can the community be supported to assess and award scores to the internees? So I guess he's trying to bring the community into actually assessing the students. That brings me also to the next question, which says there is need to enhance documentation of community engagement activities. And the community engagement reports may be reorganized into a publication or a journal so that this can be accessed. That whole idea of making sure that what universities are doing in community engagement is documented. An interesting question from Jacqueline Okello, who says that often students go out without clear objectives. I guess this aligns quite well with what Siobhan said in her presentation. So students go out without clear objectives, and therefore the community engagement is only beneficial to those students who know what they want or are a little bit more serious. Her question is, how can universities better prepare interns to maximize the opportunity of community engagement? Mr. Chairman, I believe those are the only questions that I have for now. Although maybe I should add one more question from Cyrus, which has been debated quite a bit on the forum. And the question is, yes, you say that community engagement should be factored in the promotion of staff, for example. When staff research, they produce publications, how do you quantify contribution to community engagement for purposes of promotion? He asked that question. It has been debated a bit, but maybe the panelists can also add some things. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we proceed as we have been doing. We invite first the keynote speaker to see whether she has comments or responses, and then we go to the panelists. So Professor Sibuga.
Yes. I'd like to address the question by Swamu on research having been useful, but findings are never sent back. I think this is a real problem. And what I find universities doing now is that they are opening offices for technology transfer, and in which the main activities in offices would be translating research results, breaking them down from the complicated scientific outcomes into usable products. So that is one way. But another way is that in many cases, like in agricultural research, for example, which I'm more familiar, we usually work with local extension workers in the area, purposely so that they know from the beginning how everything is being done. And of course, there'll be the farmers themselves or farmer groups or whoever. And that's why I talked about creation in the fact that everybody is involved from the beginning, including even coming up with the project proposal as part of the demand-driven research, which I pointed out. So in that case, the issue on the research outputs is very, very critical. But in the process of co-creation, farmers or whoever the targets are usually pick up what they think are the most valuable outcomes for their own use. And it has happened that some farmers don't wait for you to go back and provide feedback. This is what we have found. Before you know it, some have already started, have adopted, and they're practicing. But it is true, we need dedicated offices which would work on the research results to break them down into user products. It's very, very critical. And some universities are starting by having outreach offices or desks. And of course, there are many other ways of dealing with that, including preparing extension material, which would be in a simple language. We have expertise for that kind of thing in universities, again, but also in other offices outside the university. We have expertise on how to translate research findings into a usable material and prepare in the form of extension leaflets. So those are the ways, but we also need to look at the other side, that when we prepare extension leaflets, for example, do the desired audience pay attention to them? There have been cases where we find extension material being used to wrap some tobacco, to prepare cigarettes. They're being used to, you know. So there are both sides have a certain responsibility, not only with the universities, but also with the communities. How do they use the material once made available to them? Is something which is beyond the capability of the university to control. And then there was the issue of documentation of community engagement activities and how universities can better use community engagement promotion. This I don't think we can reach an answer in this discussion, but it is something that can be deliberated by individual universities, just like the discussions that were held to come up with the current promotion criteria. So this is something that can be considered, but I don't think we can come up with an answer in this particular discussion. Only that the issue I want to stress here that engagement activities were factored in the promotion criteria. So that's what I can say for now.
Thank you very much. We are now inviting the panelists if they have comments or if they would like to answer to the questions. Panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Mohammed again. I want to contribute on 3 comments. The first one is about community engagement. How can you integrate community engagement in promotion? Definitely a part of publication, but you can digest the knowledge you generate through publications, maybe to policy brief or project brief. So that might be indicators how adoption rate of the technology or research output that are clearly measurable and can be integrated in the promotion criteria of universities. The second one is about research outputs. Most of them are not useful to the community. This is true. And as I said, academic community, they have to create ownership right from the beginning during co-design of the project. Otherwise, it might be not relevant to the community. And during research uptake, it will be very difficult. So my comment to universities is to make sure, or at least to encourage researchers to engage communities right from the beginning of designing of the research. And the third one is about triple helix or quadruple helix, how they can be integrated. To have a common framework is not easy. We need somehow to have integrated framework that can suit university, industry, government, and community. So we need to have joint framework in order to make it functional. So it's a bit a process, but no way that university can create or can develop a framework without again consulting these other parties in this ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
So I'd like to also contribute to the conversation around what the last speaker was talking about in terms of how do we community engagement is very important, but how do we make sure that we include it in some form of promotion, or basically how do we go about it to encourage people to do community engagement, if that leads to promotion, or how do we go about it? And I I think that one of the speakers said that the answers don't necessarily will come from here, but this could potentially be some ideas. Just like you would do a curriculum, there's a project design, and if there is a design around, this is how I intend to do community engagement, this is what I'm going to be looking out for, this is how I'm going to engage industry, and these are going to be the learning outcomes. And then I don't know whether there's a supervisory body or something, someone that accredits that, and that would be one of the ways. And then I don't know whether at universities there's like 360 reviews where the students can be engaged in assessing their lecturers, kind of saying, when we put you in this placement, how often did your lecturer engage with you? What are some of the things that they were interested in? What were sort of the learning outcomes? I don't know whether this happens in academia, where there's we do that here where I work, where there's a 360 degrees, your subordinates, give each other feedback. So I don't know whether this happens where students give feedback, and then this would potentially lead to, do we promote this to a different whatever they have, this student has a better engagement. But definitely one thing for sure, if universities want to do community engagement, there has to be some form of reward, there has to be some sort of benefit that encourages the student, the lecturer, to focus on this more than other things that would lead to a higher academic trajectory. So this could also be something that would lead to that promotion, that higher academic trajectory. Then the other thing I was thinking about is funding. If universities could avail funding for these programs, because again, if there is no money into something to encourage a program to move forward, I think that it will always be in the backseat, and people will always focus on the things that have more, return on investment. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. We are still inviting the panelists, if they have comments or responses to these questions, most welcome.
Chair, one contribution.
Yes.
Without overemphasizing the role of the private sector and other stakeholders, I think we will be giving a raw deal to the discussions here. Community engagement, if we look at broadly, it's a combination with all the stakeholders that play significant role in forming and skilling, providing apprenticeship to the learners at whatever level. And I get concerned because we always pass the blame to higher education institutions. I think we need to impress on the private sector that the quality of graduates that we produce is a joint effort, and they must take interest in mentoring in their industries, those sent for attachment. Because I see a lot of people think that, the policies alone cannot support very practical training. So I think for me, just speaking from what Pius has brought here, and in Uganda, we had a very typical case of triple helix approach to training, where our Ministry of Education had agreements with the private sector foundation, with the business communities to allow university students to attach in their industries for an elected period of time under the ADB HEST project. And it has worked very, very well, to the extent that students from particular institutions come out very open, strongly in their skill sets. And from there, we are able to, try to improve on the systems which allow us. I think maybe also the private sector should be conditioned, and governments have to take agreements with them that training of higher education institutional students is not only the responsibilities of the universities. We must work together. And they can also probably be rewarded for the number of sets of students that they take to understudy and mentor, Chair, because I think that is very, very cardinal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Emile, bienvenue. Do you like to make any comments? If not, I think we should now maybe ask IUCEA if you have any comments on the questions which were raised. Secretariat.
Chair, I think what I would do is, at this point in time, I think we have exhausted the questions that we had.
Yes.
We had a lot of comments and we have picked them. And what I will do at this time, Chair, is two things. One is that I'm going to respond to some of the questions that were directed to IUCEA. And then after that, I will make some remarks and then hand it over to you for purposes of ending the meeting in a few minutes' time. If that is acceptable to you, I can continue.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We had two questions mainly that came from members that were directed to IUCEA, and I would like to just respond to them a little bit. One of the questions came from Richard Auma, and he asked, does IUCEA have any empirical evidence or conducted any research to find out the state, benefits and challenges of community engagement university in the region? And I would like to say that if you listen to the presentation today, you would have had a lot of people saying that community engagement has not been documented as it should be. I think we would agree at IUCEA. We have made some efforts, in my view. For example, some of you are aware that we hold something we call Academia Public-Private Partnership every year. And during that time, we try to bring industries and universities together, and they tell us what kinds of engagement that they have, and we have reports. I think we have probably reports going back from 2000 and something. We might be either on the 10th one if we had held one this year. So those reports are available, and they do indicate the kinds of partnerships that exist between some universities. We also hold something we call development of subject benchmarks. And when we do that, we also invite people from the industry. We invite people from communities to come and make contribution towards setting standards in those areas. And then we hold forums like this one, where we are asking the question of engagement with industry. And again, of course, when we finish here, the report will be shared with you, with every one of us. So this is useful, Chair. The other point I would like to make here, and I hear a bit of noise from my side. Just give me one sec. I want to apologize, Chair. There is a campaigning going on, so a bit of noise outside my office. So if you hear any noise, please understand. So the point I was making, Chair, is that yes, we have a bit of documentation of some of the activities that are taking place in our universities. It is on the basis of such that we are able to identify resource people like Prof. Christine and Prof. Sibuga, because we have an idea of what the universities are doing. However, I want to agree that we need to do a little bit more as IUCA, and indeed that is being planned to be done. We are already at this point in time we are going to be carrying out a survey in collaboration with CEDA very soon, which is going to be looking at the research management around in the community. And of course, when you look at research management, you also want to look at how that translates into what happens in the community. But number two, and maybe even more important, is that we also want to do a survey of the kind of patterns that are coming out of our universities in the region. That should also show how universities are contributing to solving problems of society. So I want to admit that we need to do more, and we shall do more. And we are looking forward maybe to sharing a little bit. But secondly is to say, the reason why this topic was chosen is precisely because of the fact that we would like to orient our universities and work with them towards becoming more useful in the communities that they operate in. And so thank you very much for the contribution that has come from the experts here. Thank you also very much for the many comments that many of you have made in the forum. I did not read out the comments because they were just comments, but we have picked every one of them. And there's going to be a report after this. I hope it can be shared with every one of you. But that report will capture all your comments and your recommendations. And the final thing I would like to say is just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, that the reason we are doing this is, number one, we would like to shape our vision as IUCA. Where do we see ourselves by 2050? What role will universities play in terms of community service? And the ideas here, we believe, will shape that. But in the short term, we also want the ideas that we have picked from you to be used in the development of our next strategic plan, 2021 to 2026. And I believe that will capture some of the engagements and addresses one question that was asked by, let me see, by Bonica Mathias. He asked, is it possible for the IUCA to engage universities under its jurisdiction to prioritize community engagement? So I want to believe that these ideas that are coming from here will find themselves into a strategic plan, and therefore it will find itself into some structured ways of dealing with our universities and enabling them or helping them, if we can, to engage with their communities around them a little bit more. So those are the comments I would like to make at this point in time. And Chair, having said that, then I can pass the back to you and you can close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I should like to make a quick remarks before we close the meeting. The first one is to thank the keynote speaker and also the panelists for very clear, relevant, and brilliant presentations. Also to thank the participants for their contributions. I think we have had a very fruitful meeting, and I'm very happy to hear that IUCA is planning to prepare a report of this meeting so that we can follow up on the various ideas and the recommendations which were made during this meeting. I should like personally to thank IUCA for involving me in this meeting. I think it was very good. I learned a lot, and I thank them very much. And also to congratulate them once again for the several results which were achieved during the 50 years of existence. And we look forward for more results and achievement in the coming years. So with these few remarks, I think I would like now to bring this meeting to a close. And once again, thank you very much, and look forward to hearing back from IUCA as soon as possible. Thank you, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, and see you on 23rd. Please mark it on your diaries, 23rd of September to be the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good presentations.